Greetings! It is I, Titus Dracovin, your Lord and Emperor here at the Dracovin Empire, and welcome! I hope everybody's having a great day. We're talking tabletop some more. We're diving back into the world of darkness today. One of my favorite worlds to dive into for a lot of its interesting and complex lore. And today we're doing an especially interesting one. We're diving back into Mage. Now, again, I've talked about Mage and my misgivings for running it, but I also, as a player, have always enjoyed Mage and some of the interesting concepts it's brought about. So it's this mixed bag of, like, I'm not big at storytelling at it because, honestly, it's the hardest, I would say, one to run out of the core three at very least, and maybe the hardest, or one of the hardest ones to run out of all the World of Darkness systems. Doesn't mean it can't be very fun, can't be feeling great about it, and you can keep things simple, but those things usually give me a little hesitation. But today, we are diving into, well, of course, what I said today was, what the title of this entire thing is, the Council of 9 Mystic Traditions. What the hell am I talking about? Well, if you're looking at the M20 book, the Mage 20th Anniversary book, and beyond, it is one of the 3 major factions. Well, one of the major factions in general. There are technically more factions than that. But anyway, from earlier editions, these were the base ones. Similar to something like Vampire the Masquerade or Werewolf, where there is a base group, the 9 Mystic Traditions are the base group. The vampires have the Camarilla, so you can always play Sabat, Taumakira, or any of the other groups. The werewolves have the tribes, even though you can always play one of the other changing breeds, or some Tainted of the Worm. You really could play that, technically, Black Spiral Dancer. In this case, you could play Technomancer, you could play one of their groups. But traditionally, you play one of the 9 Mystic Traditions. And there is that. So, that's why they're a great place to start when talking about major mage groups. They are some of the most developed, and some of the most that have a lot of material for them from over the various years. And we're going to dive into it. I'll talk a brief bit about what the 9 Mystic Traditions, the Council of 9 Mystic Traditions is, and then we'll talk about the various 9 here. In older times on this channels, I would have probably done this as individual episodes for all 9. You know, that's material I don't do shorter term content like that now, so we're just going to dive into all of them as one big group here. So, why don't we begin talking about that, because again, you know, we want to learn about these 9 Mystic Traditions. And I'm going to start here. Really, I'm just showing off the bottom symbols here as I go over some basic information. And as usual, I'm using the M20 book here as one of my major books for some sources, along with the White Wolf Wikipedia is a great place, and a couple of little books that I have access to. Yeah. So, let's talk about where to start with this, thinking, what the hell is a tradition? Well, you know, a tradition is basically a magical belief system. That's the easiest way to describe it. And traditions, as a word, are for people that are members of the the Council of 9 Mystic Traditions. So they're people that manipulate magic. They believe in it in a very spiritual kind of way, rather than a scientific way, going into the Technocratic Union. Each of the members of the 9 Council represents one sphere, which is the tradition's specialty. Hence the 9 spheres of magic when I talked about magic. They began their origin in 1466. Some of these traditions are older than that, but that's when the first meetings and unition of the council happened. Some of these are made from groups that came together into one tradition. Some of them are a little more factioned than others. There have been some changes in the traditions, as 2 members that were there aren't there anymore. We'll talk about that. There have been other groups allied with it. There have been things called sub-traditions, which kind of exist, which are small groups, 2 of which were sub-traditions that replaced 2 of the ones that left the Council of 9. There have been some minor groups that have sprung up here, kind of almost a separate entities, most of them not having enough oomph to be their own thing, though there are a couple that could always evolve into that. So yes, the Council of Nine mythic traditions are, again, they are the main, and I shouldn't say antagonist, but oppressive force against what the Technocratic Union is. So basically, they are a group that's very based on the belief systems and the understanding of magic as magic, kind of, is a way to say it. Well, and they are the main group that opposes the Technocratic Union and their peregrines. So they're kind of the opposites of them in essence. Even though the Technocratic Union is a newer organization, they kind of formed as an opposite to the Council of Nine instead. Certain two older traditions, I'm not going to dive too much into those, but Suffocation and Al-i-Batin were members that left the council, and they were replaced by the Sons of Ether and Virtual Adepts. They began in the Renaissance with the original members forming in 1466 in Horizon with the Resolution of Intent, which was this kind of beginning of it. There was the original members, the Ali-Batin, Ascetic Brotherhood. I'm going to say this now. I'm going to butcher a lot of things. Shkvarti, Chor Celesti, Dreamspeakers, Order of Hermes, Seers of Cronus, Sulfication, and Verbena. I'm going to really butcher these names. They formed the first Cabal, and basically it began its entire thing. And some of these groups changed their names over times. Like the Shravanti became the Euthanatoi, Chor Celesti, Core Celestial, Seers of Chronos, Cult of Ecstasy. So names have changed. The Technocratic Union came about during the Victorian Age, so they were Renaissance. And, you know, then we get into the modern age, where we have the Ascetic Brotherhood, I keep butchering them, who are the Mind Seat, Celestial Chorus, who are the Prime Seat, Cult of Ecstasy are the Time Seat, Dreamspeakers are the Spirit Seat, Euthanatos are the Entropy Seat, Order of Hermes are the Forces Seat, the Sons of Ether are the Matter Seat, and the Sons of Ether are a former member of the Technocracy. It's an important thing to mention there. The Verbena are the Life Seat, and the Virtual Adepts were one of the newest traditions who deal with telecommunications, our correspondence. There are plenty of factions. There's an organization to this entire thing. And yes, this is the Council of Nine Mystic Traditions, where the Council of Nine themselves, the leadership, and we are currently on the 59th council? They might have had another one since. There was the Horizon War, Avatar's Storm, and Armageddon, which are storylines things. So there's a new Horizon Council post that. So this is the M20 thing, where they've changed. Yeah, so the current counseling naming is different with the new version of it, as things have changed post, you know, the shakeup that everybody kind of went through. People went through a lot of shakeups. Anyway, let's talk about the Ascetic, Akashic Brotherhood. I've been butchering it the entire time today. Akashic Brotherhood. There's an Akashic Brotherhood member. So, the Akashic Brotherhood. They were previously known as the Akashiana Sangha, Order of the Vehicle of Akasha, or the Akashian. They master mind, body, spirit, and they're very personal disciplined. Yeah, it turns out, you know. So, main spheres are mind and life. They're affinity spheres there. They have their focus, which is self-perfection. And, again, you can kind of dive into as M20 looks at things here with their organizations. And it's pretty much just some changes and stuff there, too. So. They basically got a very heavy East Asia feel to them, as they follow some of the traditions and paragrams that were from the Middle Kingdom, you know, the area within China, and have kind of built up their own philosophies based on that. It's the idea that they have a harmony to everything, as they say, and though they don't originate in China, which is one of those important things, it's sort of like the idea that a lot of those idealisms spread to with their beginning there. So they aren't originally from China. They're more from an area of Tibet and India, Nepal, China, and that kind of area there. Though, again, there's a very, like, mixture of, like, Buddhist martial arts feelings to their philosophies. There have been a lot of teachers in the group. Gautama Buddha is a major one of them. Buddhism, Taoism, Shintoism, yoga, folk medicine, a lot of that stuff combined in it. They helped build Shaolin Tempers, Angkor Wat. They were through Tyrants. They were members of like a lot of... They were involved with a lot of stuff. So this is a very old tradition is the other thing too. The Akashic Brotherhood. So, anyway. They have still ancient enemies. The Wulong. They're a big group. That's something to dive into. You know, they're ancient enemies there, and they're kind of more allied, and, you know, okay. Kind of diving into this is kind of a little, like, interesting that they are... I'm trying to, like, figure out a way to, like, summarize their existence in a way that, you know, makes it quick. You know, that's one of those things that I don't think I was ready for today. Is a good, simple, and keeping it brief summary. It's one of the things that, like, you know, I spent a lot more time on the clans and stuff, and some of those clans were very easy to do. Unfortunately, Mage traditions are very deep. Anyway, so they're the Brotherhoods, which, you know, it doesn't matter if you're man or woman, they're just called the Brotherhood. It's essentially led by the Kanagara, monastic ascetics of the Phoenix Robe sect. But there are other groups that have a lot of political power within them. The political power is broken in part because of things that happened in Mage's world's history. But basically the top tier kind of, I don't want to call it like martial artist type people, because that's like really not correct. It's the, you know, thing is there's politically active groups, and there's groups that, you know, mix with the entire thing, but it's the idea that it is a martial arts in a way, or a, not a martial arts. I just keep fumbling with the concept behind it, because it's just one of those things it's hard to dive into. Again, I guess the best way to go about this one is here, because they believe in the self-perfection, you know, cosmic harmony, learning upon oneself, diving into your own mind and perfecting your own body and self, and channeling your own energy through yourself. these kind of things scream what it means to be Ascetic Brotherhood. And granted, certainly, you know, there are organizations and groups that teach these things. You know, monasteries, the more Asian version of monasteries, not the, you know, religious ones from the Western world. They're very different. But anyway, I think the idea of mind does scream very heavily into them, because it is the inward perfection and mastering your own, you know, the mind controls the body kind of thing. So it's pursuing, you know, respect, intense apprenticeships, focus, dealing with that kind of thing. Yeah. And there are many, like, different groups. But again, like, martial arts culture is a big way of this. And yes, a lot more modern members of the Akashic Brotherhood would probably, like, come about it from that angle when it's not quite correct. And that's why I'm trying to, like, figure out a great way of saying it for the Akashic Brotherhood here. I really try to butcher their name. So, again, those people that are coming into it nowadays, coming at it more that martial arts thing, that's why, you know, it becomes more difficult, because it's a lot more than that. Because it's, you know, you do have that essence which just match with a lot of martial artists, but it's a little bit more than that, and the philosophies of that. And, you know, it might be a little bit more that Buddhist, Shintoist, Taoist kind of mentality that are deep within there, and those idealisms that are the difficulty of kind of expressing that there. But, yeah. So, the Akashic Brotherhood, I hope that describes it well enough. You know, that's a kind of harder one in a way to talk about. Let's talk about the Celestial Chorus here. So their affinity spheres are prime, focus, and spirit. And as I said, for the Celestial Chorus, or as they were originally called, the Chorus Celestial, yeah, that's just a name that I can say. Anyway, they are the current seat of Prime. So yes, that's why Prime is the first one, then Focus. Forces and Spirit are their kind of adjacencies? Adjacencies? Okay, there we go. I said the actual word. So, their idea is to touch the divine. That's the best way of saying it, the Celestial Chorus. They have a belief in the one and prime from which all originates. There is a tying of this to Abrahamic faiths and the version of God from that. Though, technically speaking, they're more from ancient Egypt's monotheistic god, Aten. It's basically the source of creation that they kind of have a belief in. So there's a very religious nature to this thing. But they also believe that humans carry a shard of this divine in them. Their avatar. And the deeper you connect with one of it, the more powerful you would be. And you're hearing the song of creation. The song of the one. So, again, it's a monotheistic faith, but they kind of go by the belief that the divine has many facets, can be expressed through many names, religions, and creeds. So it's the idea that they believe all monotheistic faiths are basically pretty much the same as their own faiths, and it's just a version of it. Yeah. And there are many faiths and denominations that come together and worship services of the one, and each effectively have only their own path to the one. Again, that's on the best of times, but the unfortunate thing is that doesn't always happen in the case, that there are plenty of infighting and battles between each other, and yeah, they don't... It's the idea that they get along, they don't always get along. So the Celestial Chorus has plenty of times that they have battled with each other, even, and had issues with each other. It's just an unfortunate thing that as a result of their way of doing things, unfortunately. So yes, there's this idea of song, too. That your avatar is a function of that song. So, arts and the song itself are, you know, a expression of your faith, unity, and harmony with the divine will. And singing is an important part of their way. They're expressing it. Big expressions of magic for them would be things like light, fire, warmth, harmonic vibration, sublime music. They're very... Christian rock? I really hate to say that, but there is a level to that in this entire thing here. You know? It's again like this weird juxtaposition for their group. They've been led out of Curia, a 17-member synod of counselors, finance authors, tribunes, notaries. They basically like a almost council that leads them, and this has been since the Roman Republic. So there has been quite an age of their existence. Whoop. Sorry, I clicked the wrong thing there. Again, as with all these, ascension is the ultimate goal. Prayer is important, sacraments and symbols. They have a complex age, which we're not going to really dive into, but just knowing that they are a very religious group. You know, honestly, I might be able to do more in-depth videos on these at some point in time, like one or two. Kind of like checking on some extra information here. I could do really in-depth ones. Sorry, side note there. So, certainly, and again, they have plenty of different groups and orderings within them based upon a combinations of, like, different faiths that they've originally come from, different groupings that have happened from breaking in their way of understanding and reacting to religious idealisms in their own worship of the existence of creation itself. So certainly there is a lot of complexity to them that make them a very interesting tradition there to talk about. So that is the Celestial Chorus there. A little easier to talk about and dive into. Well, let's talk about the Cult of Ecstasy. Yes, the Cult of Ecstasy. So, they are, of course, the time seat. For reasons? Yeah. And time, life, and mind are their affinity spheres. Okay. Let's talk about the Cult of Ecstasy, because we, you know, mages, always interesting. Again, these were the Sahajiya, and they see, they're visionaries, seers. They want to transcend boundaries and limitations through sacred experiences. What does this mean? Drugs, music, sex, they're all means to an end that they employ for these experiences to bring about new mental states. So that's the entire idea. They're bringing out mental states that allow them to transcend the physical awares, trances that allows mages to see beyond the normal, and go outside the lines that keep people and mages penned in. They take the word ecstasy to its original meaning, an intense rush of feeling that catapults the subject into an altered state. Doesn't have to be pleasant, but most members of the cult of ecstasy prefer pleasant ways of doing this. So again, it's sort of like, it doesn't always have to be a pleasant way to catapult your mind into another state, but they prefer it that way. They break down barriers and self-imposed limitations to give you eye-opening experience. Yeah. So, certainly, that's a great way of saying that, you know, you get high, you have lots of crazy sex, you do all kinds of strange things to make your mind there. You listen to musics that just dive into your brain. So, yeah. The idea that, you know, dancing, sex, drugs, and music are huge parts of their existence is a yes, they are. So when you say the cult of ecstasy, they mean the cult of ecstasy. Yeah. It's also very loosely structured, is one of those things. It has a lot of subsets. It's got some leaders. They have festivals, raves, contents, tribal meetings, gatherings where they all kind of come together and do their thing where they kind of meet and chat about what's up for their group, but also do lots of things to continue their, existence into ecstasy. So yeah, they do have a rigid element to them. The Sahaja path of the Code of Ananda is basically their way of respect, and then after that it's negotiable. They do have their own initiation way of doing things, and the idea that you're focusing on, again, the Akashic Brotherhood, they're very, inner self, focused that way. The Celestial Chorus, song, chants, religious belief, they're let's get high or just dive into pleasure and sometimes pain to understand the nature of the universe. It's an interesting focus to them. So, again, they are certainly dealing with a time aspect from that way, I guess. It's an interesting seat for them to have. And again, they are something that's older than the 1960s, but hippies in 1960s are definitely something very deeply ingrained into idealism of the cult of ecstasy, because that was a time period a lot of what they are came to the forefront. Sex, drugs, and rock and roll, that 60s, their heyday was almost during that time period. They uplifted even more than they were. It became popular. Let's talk Dreamspeakers. Yes, Dreamspeakers. That's a really cool picture there. I'm not gonna lie, I like that picture there that they have there. So they're holders of the keepers of spirits. And the thing about Dreamspeakers, they are also called the Kavati in the 20th anniversary edition, so I don't know if they mentioned that here. Somewhere they might mention it. But anyway. They practice a lot of shamanism. Communing with spirits as part of magic, existing as intermediaries between the mortal world and the spirit world. So they are very spiritual aspects, and yes, it's a very big, heavy levels of shamanism, but they aren't just... There's plenty of different shamanism cultures. They are a very diverse tradition because they represent ancient cultures of Africa, Native America, the Inuit, Aboriginal Australians, along with some practitioners of Shinto, some independent spiritual savants, and descendants of various forgotten tribes and civilizations from throughout the world. So it's effectively a very diverse group that's kind of come together under one banner. They are almost shoehorned together there because of that, and their desperate cultures seemingly would have kept them apart, but they've actually found a common ground for the respect and dedication to the balance between physical and spiritual reality. So it's sort of like they were just shoved together in a way by other groups, and they found a common ground in that. So they found something interesting, that they all have this aspect of belief in the spiritual world. And the gauntlet has grown thicker, the spirit world more dangerous. Their duties as shamans have become increasingly harder. And yes, many mages overlook spirit, and sleepers have forgotten them altogether. The Dreamspeakers kind of walk that middle ground to kind of see and hear and understand what others do not, and basically fill an important role in the modern world. They are probably not the only group that dives into spirit, but they're probably the one that dives more than any other. So the Affinity Spheres are spirit and forces life or matter. So, as they're organized, again, a shamanic path is a very solitary one, but they are quite social. So they have kind of like a supportive network for all of them. And they, wander many roads, travel many places, communicate with each other as more modern cultures and more modern technology kind of exists. Separation has grown shorter. So the bonds between them have grown more powerful, in fact, in a way, It's sort of like there was a lot of like self-only in Dreamspeakers, but definitely with this more modern communications, it's allowed a more community-focused existence for them that has brought them together in a way in the modern world much better. That, understanding that. And many practice very old ways. That's the idea, is they practice these old traditions and stuff based upon their original cultures for their shamanism. So, hey, they now have social media groups. I'm sure a bunch of them might be part of a Discord server. I'm joking, but like in your game, you could easily make a group of Dreamspeakers just on a Discord server from various places across the world. And again, like, elders respect the younger learns from the elders. It is very informal still. So they don't really, you kind of have groups within it, but again, it's a very informal mess, almost. Their essence is kind of like old medicine art. Because again, it's not what shamans were. They were a combination of spiritual and medical kind of people. So it's the idea that you are keeping your harmony in body and spirit is a very big one. The harmony with the spirit world is probably the most important thing that they kind of dive into. So it's a lot of like items that you're going to use as part of it, and your help, that it's medicine work. I guess is the best work. Shamanism, faith, and stuff. And there are expanded upon that. Voodoo, witchcraft, yoga. There are a few that do other even more strange things. A few look into things like cybernetics as an idea. That's kind of a weird one. And then they can be shunned by their companions for some of their more unusual idealisms for that. But it doesn't mean that they're not accepted, especially if they keep their idealism to what it is. So, yeah. The internet does also have its own spiritual aspect, you know. The idea, because this is something that one of the other groups we're going to talk about, like the digital web has a consciousness, and by extension a soul. So social media, you know, and things like that, and understand the spiritual aspect of the digital web. So there's also a little bit of a tech-romantic movement kind of there, and repercussions that could occur within the Dreamspeakers, because as the connection and use of this, there is a kind of almost essence there, almost a spirit that they can understand as spiritualists. That is the Dreamspeakers. So yeah. And again, they're just a loose bunch of people thrown together, too. Poor them. But they've made it work. So, the Euthanatos. Once known as the Charcavanti. I'm butchering that. The people of the wheel, as they were called. They were also known as the Namavanti. So they are devoted to the forces of death, rebirth, destiny, and karma in the world. That's the easy way of saying it. They deal with entropy. They're a collection of thanatostic cults, necromancers, priests of fate, assassins, scholars, gamblers, and healers. That's a wide variety of groups here. The idea is they all embrace death in the world, and it cleanses and makes the way for future growth. So it's the idea of the kind of wheel of life. Many of them believe in the reincarnation of souls, meaning death in one's life is not to be feared, and is a crucial part of spiritual development. Those that do not share this belief recognize a continuous cycle of death and rebirth throughout life, and accept that times death may be necessary to end suffering. So they kind of guard the movements between life and death. They see creation as a spinning wheel, death and rebirth, and they do see when someone or something interferes with the wheel's motions, those obstacles are to be removed. And they could be kind word at least, and murder at most. And the most controversial part of that is they see their duty is to push this cycle forward. Removing sources of disease, corruption, and misery from the world to quicker turn the wheel of ages. This also means when they judge a person's moral degradation to grow too harmful to themselves and allow them to continue. And that's when it's good to deliver a good death to them. So yeah. And they do understand this responsibility and are painfully aware of the risk of Johor, which Johor, with Jhor, is the resonance of the underworld, the energy of death itself. And if you major dabbles too much in such studies, can be affected with it. The resonance of death energy. Yeah, it's type of quiet, and it affects death mages instead of marauders. So yes, there's a risk to it in a way. But then the other work is a necessary work, and they're the only ones that do it. It's a sacred duty. It has to be carried out. Only the most strong-willed of their membership can carry it out, too. It's a burden, a responsibility for release and renewal. So, yes. Affinity spheres, entropy, life, spirit. Magic is the cycle. And the idea that controlling probability, the forces of modality. It's just a thing that they do. And there is a lot of ways to look at this, and certainly there is a lot of focus that they can do, as there are a lot of different faiths and ideas that do hold this kind of idealism, very similar to them. So they do have a very mixed bag of beliefs. Yoga is actually a pretty big thing in them, strangely enough, and a lot of like Eastern beliefs, especially when they deal with the idealism of reincarnation, some of these, not the belief systems, but the practices of these belief systems actually kind of end up in them, in their way of doing things. So that's an interesting idea about them. So yes, their path and their way of doing things is kind of sinister and not really understood by other people. But they are all very ethical in the way that they do things, with a very strict code, an emphasis on maintaining the cycle, and that kind of unity of all things that exist. They, like many other groups, well, like some other groups, don't have a rigid hierarchy, and you're just basically expected to follow your code. And, you know, if you do not follow the code, the threat is final death and removal from the wheel. The traditions of existence. So, mentors and their initiates have a strict bond. And it also has a lot of different sects because of that. They have a lot of different groups. They've kind of don't have a unification in that way. So, that's an important thing to mention. Not having a unification because of that. So, yes, own weapons are important to them because it can be an example of power. And a lot of deities use weapons and stuff too. A lot of these old gods that were part of the ideals of cycles and stuff like that, which have a kind of honorific in their existences. That is something that does happen, like from Shiva, Kali, Ruda, Hindu gods, other different pagan gods, saints and stuff like that. There's practices within a lot of traditions which kind of mirror some of the idealisms of the our good friends here, the Euthanatos, and it is almost pushed forward, you know, and so a tool for your work is a weapon, because remember, you have to be ready to face death, morality, the ethics of killing in maintaining the cycle, the wheel. Yeah. Yeah. So, they're a very interesting group. And certainly, with the new world, you know, they've kind of like, they believe in renewal too. So sort of like the new council, their new version of the council, renewed for the new age. That's an important part about kind of like talking about it. Like each of these has their, you know, new awakening in the new time periods too. And especially they, you'll see them going more by their old name, Carvanti. Again, I'm going to be butchering that one. Because again, the name Euthanatos is very death. It has it technically in Greek in the name kind of thing. So finding a new... talking about themselves, that's been an important part of them. Anyway. So yes. Certainly the post-reckoning, a lot of things have happened for these groups here, but a lot of them have maintained themselves very much the way they were. Certainly there has been some refreshment in a lot of these traditions, which, whether good or bad for them, it's what they are. Let's talk Order of Hermes. Yeah, I like that picture too. Yeah, some really nice pictures for the mage here too. So they are the seat of forces. They are basically high mages of European tradition. So now we're talking a group that is one of the pillars of the traditions. They are one of the main groups that brought about the Council of Nine Mystic Traditions. They're big on magical knowledge. They're from the Dark Ages. It does have a lot of failings, though. They've been big on magical knowledge, shaping history and stuff like that. Hubris is a big one. And when the Reckoning occurred, many of their traditional ways were challenged. Old secrets are gone in a lot of ways. Mystical items, powerful patrons destroyed or locked away behind the gauntlet. And those that remain only a hope to regain what was lost. So, yeah. It's... They believe they command nothing less than the keys to the universe. They're scholars of ancient magics and arcane rituals, intense studies of practices tapping into the elemental energies of the universe, manipulating them. They are the true essences of mage to the T. Alchemy, high ritual magics and stuff like that. Chaos magic. A lot of different interesting ideas focusing on them. And yes, forces is one of their core aspects of that. Cool. Welcome. There are different houses within them that favor different spheres: life, matter, mind, spirit. All could be secondary positions, but forces is the key to their existence. And even in the new version of it, post everything that happened, they do still have a high disciplinary system. They have code of conduct and different things that rules that dictate their behavior protocol, everything that they're doing throughout their thing. The 13 houses still exist within this factions. So none of the houses fell. They still infight with each other like no tomorrow. So yeah. That's the basic essence of Order of Hermes. When I talk Order of Hermes, screaming, hey, it's a mage, is the basic foundation of it. And yes, it technically, there are some older history to them before the Dark Ages, but really their main existence and these houses coming together, forming a group, happened during the Dark Ages, which then, of course, when the big cabal happened and the big council of all the different ways of magic happened, they became the Order of Hermes. So, yeah. So certainly when we're getting into the final night, the time period, which is now, a lot of the stuff that happened in the world just caused so many issues to them too. It's things like the Week of Nightmares, which affected the vampires, the Asasa War, the Shard Realm of Forces, War of Ruins, all this stuff that happened in the modern history, technically, have had a bleak outlook for the Order. A lot, in a way. Young members kind of like this. Old masters and their intrigues were gone. Because, again, very similar to, let's say, Vampire and the Camarilla, where the older, more powerful seemed to control the systems and kind of do it. That was one of the things. And, with a lot of weird things happening in the world, magic's becoming more acceptably, they're kind of like idealisms in the more modern of it. Technology and magics are not enemies, but sides of the same coin. So the orders and the houses are basically beginning in something new, almost. So yeah. There are some changes post the Reckoning, but they've only evolved. And that's what the Order of Hermes has kind of done. It's something that, as this... Again, there's always this idea that a lot of these traditions are desperate groups in a way that are almost kind of shoved together. And this one is a lot... is both true and not true. Yeah, they kick their fucking asses of each other. They just despise each other in a way. Certainly. But they all know when to work together. So, that is the Order of Hermes. Mages to a fault. Again, that's the best way to describe them. Let's talk Sons of Ether. Because they are interesting, and I really like... The clockwork thing fits very well. So, there are the one that has held the Seat of Matter. And they've been members of the Council since 1904. Which sounds like a long time. Well, they've joined the Council of Nine in 1904. The Sons of Ether did. New version of some council they're on also. But they're also known as the Society of Ether. They are a group of technomancers that left the Union to align with the Council of Nine. So they were a part of the Order of Reason and the Technocracy, but abandoned their compatriots after the Union aided the expulsion of the Luciferous Ether from the Consensus. So they've adopted several outdated technologies and incorporated them into their paradigm. So it's sort of like this idea that they are clockwork? Steampunk? Steampunk mages. Sure. Steampunk mages. They're the Matter Seat. Steampunk mages. Just take a look there. It's a steampunk mage. So Matter's important. Focus and Prime are things. So, yes. The idea is there's an imaginative grasp in the principles channeled through established physical and energetic technologies. They do see science as a very important part in their understanding of the universe, but they are also very showy, romantic, and graceful, kind of looking futuristic while yet not. They love classic sci-fi, more than mundane fact and stuff like that. So, yeah. It's this idealism that, science, but with a flair. I do love the Sons of Ether. They're a very odd group, too. So, yes, like some groups, they are fairly well organized. Theoretically. They're boasters about their members of the society. But they're fractious, competitive with each other. They often seek praise from each other, criticize each other, to go back to the lab and do better next time. They bury themselves in research for weeks on end with very little companionship. So, yeah. They are part of this larger order, but they are also individual scientists in a way. And yes, They do seem selfish, egotistical, pushing their own paradigms of the individual, leaving the masses behind. This is kind of the way they're almost looked at. It's an all or now for science and developments. But it is a spirit of tomorrow that they look towards, and things to come. I guess they're very futuristic, sort of. Like, they're the kind of people that would have made, like, the World's Fairs and things like that. And a lot of the interesting designs that have showed up in various places. Think Epcot. I'm saying the wrong word today. My English is just so bad. Epcot in Disney World. Think about all these things where there's, like, these futuristic ideas and stuff like that. That is the Sons of Ether. And again, 20th century is great for them. You know, still a lot of sci-fi. Steampunk is very popular in the culture and stuff like that. You know, there is a group of the Sons of Ether, or the Sons of Ether that just love that kind of stuff. And amongst all the traditions, only the virtual Adepts and sometimes the other groups enjoy allowances from paradox. Weird sciences and stuff are big on their way, you know. That's the idea. So yeah. That's Sons of Ether. They're a really fun one to talk about. Again, all these have more, and maybe I'll do some more in-depth things about these. But they were part of their technocracy. See, that's the idea. Is I like what they say for the stereotypes here is obscenities in the name of science, perverting wonders into control. That's kind of their ideas. They are scientists, like the technocracy, but they believe in the wonder of science rather than the control of science. They are dreamers who invent. Pretty cool right there. Verbena. Let's talk to Verbena. So, they hold the seat of life. They're very druidic. Yeah. Druidic's the best way of saying it. So life is very important. Forces is there too. So they have a idea. In a way, this is a little similar to the Dreamspeakers, but they preserve ancient crafts and wisdom passed down over the ages by witches, warlocks, druids, druidesses, shamans, mystics, priests and priestesses of old gods. While the Dreamspeakers go for more shamanic kind of spiritual ones, yes, there are some overlap in a way between that. There still is less about that and more like the old gods here. This is more Wiccan, you know, and that's what modern Verbena is. It has similarities to Wiccans as they are today. There is very old legacies and cultures divided into them. So there is this idea of holistic healing, respect for the earth and the natural order, and they have this common principle there of connecting them together. And there's a belief in power and understanding can be found embracing life in all its passions and pains. So it's kind of like similarities, but they still have this hugely differences in the way that they practice their going about. While the Dreamspeakers have adapted to modern society, the Verbena, unfortunately, have had the most challenges by advancing technology and civilization. It's sort of like apply lessons and practices the old way to a modern world is very difficult. And, you know, both mages and mortals see that kind of almost as a dying craft in a way, you know. It's unfortunate that their ways are almost dying out that way in a much more direct way than some of the, let's say, old ways of the Dreamspeakers. The Dreamspeakers can still find places for themselves. The Verbena have had less success in the modern world. So Many of them might have something like a Book of Shadows that contains your secrets. Herbs and potions are popular with them for drawing out spiritual things. So it's this essence of, witchcraft, of druidism, of the natural world and stuff like that. Of focusing on your body fluids and, that carry life. There is a good connection to music, song, and dance, very traditional things like that, connecting in rituals. So, yeah. As for, getting into the modern times, there have been some renewal in holistic lifestyles which help them with that kind of thing. And there is now more emphasis on exploring new ideas and incorporating different cultures, which helps them. It's this thing that, with the 1960s and rebirth of holistic lifestyle, which does exist to this day, still to this day, there's this idea of that and things like that. That has helped them. But they are still, in a way, stuck in their old ways. Unfortunately for them, that old ways of doing things, doesn't help. Covens are their foundation. They're solitary members of exists, but they prefer to work in small groups. They're usually more women than men, and women have more respect. So many female mages tend to go towards this tradition because of this. Two leaders govern large coverns with a single one in charge of a 3-person group. They favor the older members to the younger ones. And old school covens can be very autocratic. There will still be votes, especially when it comes to ordeals, tests, or combats and stuff like that. They do respect bloodlines and family members. Each one will have a kind of a grove. It might be like a garden in the backyard of the leader. It could be a place in the forest or something. They have meetings at the 2 equinoxes, other important times of the year. So they have an organization, and a very natural-based organization for themselves. There are factions within them. That's an important thing. You can't deny that they do have a number of factions. They have 4 avatar essence types. So, again, doesn't really matter, though, necessarily, but they're based upon the 4 different types of avatar: pattern, dynamic, questing, or primordial. Yeah. They're based on that. You just don't... And yes, you're more likely to join it if you're one of them, but you don't have to be. Anyway. So, yeah. They are very loosely organized together. But there's the Verbena. And finally, we talk about the last ones, the Masteries of Correspondence, the virtual Adepts, who are masters of telecommunication, who came about and joined the tradition in the Council of Nine and the Council of Nine magic traditions in the 1960s. 1961 is when they joined. They're also known as the Mercurial Elite. They're the youngest members of it. They focus on the digital web. So that's an important part of their existence there. So, correspondence / data. Again, data is the other name for it for the technocrats. And forces are their 2 things. And everything is data for them. That's an important part of it. So, their idea is they're seeking a way to reach the singularity, the point where mankind transcends into something post-human. That's what they want. They want to be beyond humanity. They see the universe as mathematical formulas, as a computer, so that they're another type of science type. And they are a very difficult paradigm to kind of understand in a lot of ways because of this. They perform calculations, manipulate information and data. Computers are an important part of their entire existence because guess what? It's a big tool about it in connecting to the data world. They shape, alter, manipulate, gather, store, collate, influence, destroy information. Computer gear is the most obvious thing they will use. But there are other stuff that, is around there. Hollow implants, nanotech, sense-altering stimuli. They'll, some dark hoodies and masks and stuff like that to keep themselves a little bit more hidden and stuff like that. Very hacker group, They do, however, all of them keep the implements for their techno-magic handbook. Computers tend to be the most important part of their identity, but again, it varies. There's cybernetics, hypertech, weird science, martial arts, chaos magic, gutter magic, even sometimes shamanism, witchcraft with a technological flair. There's a lot of ways they practice. So they do have a avoidance of standard organizations and loathe conventional hierarchies. They had a basic respect for eliteness in the 90s, a peer recognition won through attitude and accomplishment. They've kind of matured since their personal achievement is very important now rather than titles or seniority. So like cleverness, wits, technological creativity, astute sense of sociological reform means a lot more than anything else for them. And there is a big reference for Adepts who tear down oppressive social structures. Because they are very anarchists by nature. So yes, that's a little bit of the virtual Adepts. I think we can kind of dive a little bit more. So yeah. The thing is, their existence is really the modern Knights. There are connections. There's been mathematicians and scholars throughout the ages. And some of the connections of their existence has led to things like the Technocratic Union. They have connections to that in that way. There's some similarities between that. But it wasn't until like the Victorian age that this group began to form. And they were connected with the technocracy. It wasn't until the World Wars that, their splitting actually had it. They were part of the technocracy. They were part of the founding of it. It's like the Sons of Ether. They were technically members of it, too. But they left basically, they left the technocracy because Alan Turing was murdered and his death faked. It was basically the last straw for them. Stole many files as possible and went into hiding in the digital web. But they did plant a failsafe within the Adepts, forcing them to forget a lot of the hypermath and theoretical physics that they had learned while their time with there. And it was then rapport with the Sons of Ether that they were able to join the Council of Nine. It was probationary from 1961 to 1966, which then they became a full member. So effectively, shit happened. They, again, another group within the Technocratic Union. Differences were emerging in the way things happened as the Technocratic Union evolved. 1950s, shit broke. They broke away, took a bunch of stuff, but, also both sides basically shot fires, burning bridges there. Sons of Ether had already joined. made some friendliness with them, got in there. So yeah, that's their kind of basic history there. But they're big in the virtual world, the virtual adepts, and they're all about, you know, transcendence of humanity through data and stuff like that, the next order. But yeah, those are the 9 traditions. And yeah, I could probably maybe dive into some of these in a little bit more depth or something like that. There might be more in-depth videos for stuff in this future. I don't know. I'll see how much people are interested in. If you are interested in, you know, let me know about me doing like super in-depth videos about like the various orders and groups and stuff like that, and like very deep history dives on these traditions and things like that. I could do something a little bit more in depth in them, and maybe do like 1 or 2 a day of doing these, possibly. It's not impossible, and I like talking about them. Certainly there have been books for all of these that can be kind of discussed. The traditions are very interesting, and I can even talk about the old ones that don't exist anymore, or aren't part of the group anymore. Unfortunately. Like the Batini, the Al-e-Batin, still exist. They're just not part of the Council of 9. They're independent. Probably desperate alliance. So, yeah. Actually, both the members that lost are now part of that there. So when I probably talk about that, that'll be a place to include that in there. So, hey. All right. So, I think that will be it for today. I'm going to run off. I'm going to go take care of a few things. Get some food and stuff like that. I'm going to say thank you, everyone who joined me today. Remember, I talk about tabletop and stuff every Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. So if you want to learn about tabletop, check me out on those days. Also, live shows of gameplay. I think only currently one going on Wednesday evenings. And discussing tabletop later on Saturdays at 6 p.m. EST, where I talk about tabletop. If you're watching this live on Twitch, hey, thank you. Leave a follow. Thanks for joining me. I hope you enjoyed learning about some stuff here. I hope my dive into it was good enough. That's one of those things. This is a really hard thing to express sometimes without going into too much detail and too much of a deep dive. I want to hit up enough information without going too far. If you're watching this on YouTube, hey, subscribe on YouTube. Hit the like button, you know, leave a comment there. Show me that you're interested in more mage stuff. You know, I can do more other World of Darkness stuff, but giving me information on which ones are the most popular also helps me. I might just, you know, do I focus on vampire stuff? Do I focus on werewolf stuff? Do I do more mage stuff? Do I do some of the other ones, you know? Give me clues on this entire thing. Anyway, I got a Discord, Twitter for checking out information on, you know, what I'm up to. You know, that my brain farts and stuff. And I think that's all about throwing it out today. Again, hope you learned enough about a good chunk about these groups and understand how they work. I was struggling with the Akashic Brotherhood there for a second, trying to figure out the right words for it. But I got through it and got all the other ones right up there in front for you, so you know them all. Anyway. So, I'm gonna say, for you guys out there, farewell for now.